Welcome to video 409, the number of the detergent. It's Repaints Palooza 3's. Okay, that didn't work at all, but there's a whole new Transformers line of nothing but repaints out, and I bought all of them. Not because I want them, but for you all, because I know how much you guys love these Repaints Palooza videos. So let's get into the Walmart exclusive Toxitronic line, the gaudiest thing in all the Transformers since G2 came out, largely because these are all basically just G2 figures. And before we get into it, your likes! Please give. And if you enjoyed this video by the end and you aren't subscribed already, please consider it. I'm going to run a blacklight on these all during the video because otherwise, what's even the point of these figures? And who better to start out with than the titular Toxic Ron, a repaint of the Laser Prime, who I initially was very complimentary of, but that I found with each subsequent version to justify its existence less and less. Yeah, I'm past the honeymoon phase. The mold worked pretty good once, one time, singular, but it keeps coming out and the flaws just aren't ignorable anymore. This should be the latest and greatest Optimus, yet it poses worse than the Earthrise, which means it poses worse than the Siege, despite sharing a lot of the same engineering those two figures had. It's got a huge backpack, it's a little puffy, the head always felt like it was in an awkward place, the pauldrons limit the articulation of the shoulder something fierce, and they make what's left look even worse. I mean no hyperbole when I say that I think the original G2 Laser Optimus Prime actually posed better than this thing does. Sure, the sculpt was worse, but then there's still a ton goofy about this thing anyways. And then look, I'm kind of enjoying the colors on this thing. It's reminding me of that era I grew up in, where back in the 90s you used to pour green slime on a figure because it was toxic or something, and that kind of play would be specifically promoted by the commercials for the toy, so that's actually kind of fun. But on this guy specifically, they're just too dull. The weapons look about right, but he himself is more avocado than he is acid or uranium. I do appreciate that they painted his dick slightly darker silver than his thighs and hips. Despite being the same overall color, it does prevent him from looking like he goes straight from legs into stomach, like the Rid 2001 Scourge they made with this same mold does. I do gotta complain that this guy just doesn't fluoresce under black light like he should. He should look radioactive like this, not even duller. And real quick, can we just talk about this dude? Like, I have no idea what his deal is. He's the leader of a Wreckers team that's also a combiner, which this figure absolutely is not, but he's got a G2 Decepticon badge. So he's a bad guy? I mean, this is all Collectors Club or BotCon bullshit, so it doesn't have to make too much sense, but is that right? Or is this something Hasbro fucked up? Transformation is still not amazing, it's finicky, and the order of operations is very specific. Do anything slightly wrong, and you will have to untransform this and start over. And then the truck mode really leans into that 90s identity. I still stress that the colors aren't vibrant enough, but the trailer has these slime leaks printed on it, and this is the kind of thing that really takes me back. If they had gone further with this motif, I could have been all about this. But as a leader, as a figure we already got a few versions of that weren't very good to begin with, it's not extra enough. If you don't have a version of this mold already, sure, go for it. But like, my Nemesis Prime is already in storage, and this thing isn't cooler than that was. Box art's probably the best thing about this figure. Then there's Watermelon Mirage, or Water Mirage. Actually, I guess it's more Alligator Mirage for some reason. Maybe the pink is supposed to be like tongue color. A figure that's justifying itself just a bit better. For starters, the colors are gaudier, though it still doesn't fluoresce under a black light like it should. It's okay, but some figures go nuclear under lights like this. And I thought that was the whole point. But what actually sells this thing really well is that this is actually a rare variant of Mirage. Sure, it's also a worse variant, but if you didn't want to buy the Amazon 2-pack, then this is kind of your lot. This is how you can get a regular priced version of the Earthrise, technically Kingdom Mirage. And as I alluded to, this is the lesser version of that figure when compared to the Siege. It lost ports, so the missile launcher can't go where it's supposed to. It lost out on QC, so the figure's a bit more frustrating to handle with certain aspects being overly stiff. It did gain posability by letting you untransform the shoulders for forwards and backwards butterflies, and you can mount the missile on the underside of the arm, which I do think feels more right for these G2 colors, so that's less of a detriment than it used to be on the normal colors one. And honestly, I don't think the green eyes on green helmet look is that bad, but the transformation kind of sucks. It's not awful, but the Siege version of the figure was pretty good, doing some clever and interesting stuff, and this just doesn't. It basically goes, what if that, but simplified, but also stiffer, finickier, and more boring. It's like a 4 out of 10, not something I dread doing, but not something that I want to do like I did on the Siege version. Emphasis on stiffer, because oh my god, do certain parts of this thing not want to move during transformation. And then you get to the Earth Formula 1 car, which some of you I'm sure will be more pleased with than the Cyberpunk variant of it. Though, honestly, I feel like it's painted more like it's NASCAR. Back of it looks like an actual engine. I don't think that you need to run out and get this one if you don't already want it, but unlike the previous figure, thumbs up if you do. It's fun, it looks pretty good, and I assume that many of you couldn't get your hands on a version of this before now. Then there's Dead End, and we finally have a figure that at least in robot mode is looking sick in his new colors. Ironically, going under a black light makes him look a lot more boring. I don't think this toy line understands itself. Unfortunately, these new Swish colors are on Dead End, the significantly worse retool of Dragstrip. Worse kibble, worse posability, worse QC, more breakable, worse transformation, and none of that really changes here. The legs still pull like an 85, the elbows still pull like an 89. The head still only swivels, the wrists just don't. They still don't anything. And I know that's not too different from Dragstrip, but at least he had 90s in his knees and elbows. The paint job is killer, and I almost want to recommend it on that alone. I mean, even the guns have it. And why shoot Autobots when you can shoot them with a gun in chromed aqua? But then you get to the transformation and it's just as bad as ever. And for the 100,000th time, for the love of God, yes, I know how I'm supposed to transform this guy. I've always known. My first one was mismanufactured. Stop telling me how to correctly transform it in the video where I told you all already that I cut the tab off that you're talking about. How am I supposed to use the tab that I cut off? That you saw me cut off? You know it's not there! Anyways, amazing news. This one is also mismanufactured the same way, though to a less bad extent. The shape of the hook this rests in is malformed, which results in it putting upward pressure on the foot. On this one, it causes this part to sit a little proud. On the other one, it caused the whole back end to flay apart because the foot would get pushed out of its locking surfaces. Anyways, everything good about the robot mode is kind of gone now. On the plus side, this really does look like an actual regular toy from the 90s. On the negative side, it looks like a really cheap, actual regular toy from the 90s. The plastic is fucking atrocious, looking like it cost 12 cents, as does all the paint, which there's a lot of, so way to abuse your budget. But the Decepticbadge, while cool that it's going extra hard being set in relief, just doesn't look right, especially with the stripe molding not getting tooled away, so there are these unnecessary ribs in it, so that's really like a 90s toy, where they just painted the same thing a different way with no changes regardless of how little the sculpt makes for it. And then you have this awful thing on the door that looks like it was drawn by a 5-year-old. What is this? An eye? A meteor? Sputnik? Why is it fading out into vaporwave lines? This detail looks like it's something some kid drew on their own personal toy. It doesn't look cool, it looks awful. It's a paint app that makes the figure less valuable. And on Menassor's arm, it doesn't even really look better. All of its best vibrant colors are tucked away on the underside now. So honestly, it doesn't even look that different outside of being relatively cheaper. This really could have been where the figure sold itself, being an arm that faded into the background less on Menassor. But it's pretty much exactly as much of a non-event as ever. If you never did get a dead end before and you want to complete your Stunticons, I'd probably like this more than the original in bot mode, and a lot less in alt mode. It's a perfectly serviceable stand-in for that thing, but it's so close to being more. Then we finally hit the good shit. The good shit in this case being a horribly overplayed figure at this point, but Sunset Sang Streaker Sideswipe, Lemon Wipe, Sun Wipe, Dust Wipe, 90s Wipe, Florida Wipe here, is living up to everything that this line has been promising from the start. He is gaudy and awful, and I love him. I mean, I question what's up with all the blue on his face, and I lament the fact that this guy is the Earthrise version, which means that his knees don't work as well as they did on the Siege. But you know what? He actually glows like the sun under a black light, though the effect is kind of undercut in his alt mode. He has an identity. I know what he's going for. He really is embodying the 90s excess that G2 was all about. This is working in all the ways that this line was supposed to up until now, but just didn't. And you know, the mold has been flogged to death at this point because it's a good one. It kind of set the standard for average posing, and while normally I'd call this transformation the best kind of 5 out of 10, compared to all the other figures I've reviewed in this video, it's a soul-shredding guitar solo. It's fast, it doesn't overstay its welcome, it's fun, it does just enough. And while the alt mode never really worked as a regular Earth mode sideswipe since it's missing its spoiler, here it doesn't matter anywhere near as much because it's not the normal version of that guy. And the way the colors fade from blue to yellow, and with the quality of the cloudy beach sunset tampos, this guy really does give off the impression of a beautiful day fading into night. This thing is a vibe in the way that the other figures haven't been so far. Unlike Clampdown from the Velocitron line, who was cooler than I expected, but didn't ultimately motivate me to keep it around, this is actually one who, despite my doneness with the mold, I actually think I'll happily wind up keeping. Then there's Dorito Jazz, or Doritas. Doritaz? And despite being easily the guy who fluoresces the second most in the correct lighting, I'm just not sure what the point of this is. I at least understand the coloration of the rest, but mono hue red Jazz is just bizarre. And red? I don't know about you, but if anything, I'd think that Jazz would be blue. Also makes me think that it's a powered up form for him, like it's out of Beast Wars Neo. This version has some superior QC to the old 86 figure in that the knees hold better, but in the transformation I find that the head now has a tendency to pop off, which it never did before, and on my particular copy there's a huge amount of flashing on the back window that prevents you from pegging that part in all the way. Also, with them still using the clear plastic for the whole roof for some reason, I will caution anyone against transforming this so the windshield properly meets up with the hood. That is how you crack the windshield on the old version. Though, I do like the cut of this clear polymer's jib more than I did on the original. And in alt mode, that part does make this video look sick under the correct lighting. Outside of the confusion that stems from me not knowing what this thing is going for with these colors and some mild frustrations from the build, I do feel more positive about this guy than a lot of the others in this line. However, that could just stem from how much I love the 86 Jazz mold. I don't know that I'm going to keep this, but I'm not actively thinking about how to get rid of it. This is also the only one to come with different accessories than normal, and I don't know why the rest of them didn't get this treatment. But he also had to be a weird ass about this by stealing the unreleased 86 Hounds ones. This is extremely bizarre, especially when you realize he doesn't really have the ports for all these. He's got 2 regular blasters and 1 missile launcher, and with no wrist or shoulder ports, that means that he has to have one of these slung across his back. They aren't a negative, they're good accessories, but it's clear that they weren't meant for him, and it's strange that they included them. It's extra weird that Hound's handgun was also tied into the box in a way that didn't actually retain it for some reason. Alright, now it's time for Sprite-flavored RC. Or RC covered in piss. Pissy. Laser Cycle. This is the worst way to get this figure. Why would you do this? How did you not realize you made it look like she hosed down her tidy whities? The original figure had a black crotch. You changed that for no reason other than to display your love of water sports. And amazingly, this is one of the figures that actually fluoresces well. So under blacklight, this little detail gets even more auspicious. What does blue mean? Motherfucker, what does yellow mean? Outside that, this is just the RC mold again, ain't it? A figure that I think gets way too much hate, but also one that I don't think we needed two versions of. And by that I mean all we needed out of this mold was Flame War. Though, to be fair, I don't think it's as bad a representation of RC as most people think it is. It's just vertically squashed with bad hip placement and leg kibble. The girl Frankenstein head on this is lame, as is the clear light piping, and then the transformation on this figure has never been good. It's not a question of tolerances, it's not a question of clearances. It's just weird, boring, and forgettable all at the same time. And then the motorcycle mode sure is a motorcycle, and that's really all I have to say about it. At least the alt mode doesn't look like it pissed itself. While we're here, there's a figure from not this line that fits the theme way too well. It's the Mystery Machine. And he does pop quite a bit under some non-standard lighting. I don't know what it is with these colors and that head, but he does feel a bit more hench than the normal version. You cannot lie to me that the inspiration for these colors was anything other than Scooby-Doo. Once again, the QC is a mixed bag of fixed problems and new ones. For instance, the arms work way better and fall off at the elbow a lot less often. On the other hand, the bumper section of this tends to fuse into one solid mass in alt mode, basically requiring you to parts form this boy so you can separate his feet. And then I can really see someone out there coming up with a 3D printed part to give this thing a camper shell on the back to really lean into that Mystery Machine 5 this thing's clearly going for. Then one last not from this line dude before we get to the big kahuna. Crosscut, who I only bought because his box was badly damaged, but he was complete and was half off at Walmart because of it. And then the cashier dropped the axe out of it, and I heard it go, but she insisted that nothing fell out, so now I don't have that piece, which I know for a fact was in the box when I grabbed it. Anyways, once again, a figure not from this line looks best under the lights that this line was meant for. And once again, it's a Skids figure that looks way cooler than Skids. I swear every last one of his retools has had more reason to exist than he did. I don't have too much to say about this guy other than I think that Burnout was better and that this figure does look pretty cool with QC that's better than ever. If you don't have any of the previous versions of this guy, go ahead and pick this up. If you do, then you aren't missing something you'll need, but I do think that you'd enjoy it. Finally, we have the G2 Tiger Stripes Grimlock that never was. And I'll be the first to say that I hate the Diaclone colors, and the fact that the G2 Grimlock was just those bland-ass pigments has always annoyed me to no end. So I'm far more favorable to this insanity with its actual out-there theming and beautiful chromed aqua chest. So why isn't this doing anything for me? The base figure is one of my favorites of all time. Shiny colors are my jam. They went ham on this thing, and I'm just not feeling it. I want to look at this thing and have my heart race, and instead I'm like, it's okay. Maybe it's the silver head, I do find that part uniquely unimpactful. Maybe it's the color of yellow and purple that they used. These should have more wow factor, and they just don't. Maybe it's the fact that under the correct lights it does a little interesting with this, but I should be like, there's no other way to display this thing other than in black light, and that's just not the case. Maybe it's the fact that the auto badge is hidden behind this weird little tampo. Maybe it's the fact that the legs are the only parts of this figure with the stripes when the whole figure needed them. I want to love this thing, and instead I'm like, I probably shouldn't have spent the $50 on this. Transformation is still phenomenal, and they even improved it further by fixing some of the tolerances in the legs, making the whole thing smoother. This is still the Masterpiece Grimlock, with every flaw brutally hammered out of it, leaving a truly honed figure. And I can't ever take anything away from the sculpt. This is quite likely the baddest he's ever looked officially. But the Dino mode just lacks that je ne sais quoi. Perhaps it's the fact that there's too much yellow here. The moments where it does have color breakup, it starts to feel a little interesting again. But overall, Grimlock is more of a banana than ever here. Though, I feel like the missing front teeth are way less of a problem now. And ultimately, I have to say that this whole subline is not great. It kind of fails to justify its existence pretty hard. The figures aren't gaudy enough or toxic enough for the Toxitron line. There's no real fiction to go along with it to make me want this stuff on an emotional or connection level. The colors are woefully out of character for most of them. The plastics they used blatantly weren't ever put under a blacklight, when that's just how you used to design figures in the early 90s. Figures like Pissy are actively ruined. Most of these molds have already been done to death, and some of them didn't need the help since one was enough to begin with. Really, I'd say that this line's best feature is giving you a second crack at figures like Grimlock and Earth Mode Mirage, if you're willing to ignore how insane the colors are while still not being insane enough. I wanted to like all of these more than I did, and in the right moment, I can get a little something out of Grimlock, but that may be just because the base mold is so good, and I of course get a lot out of Lemon Wipe at all times. However, there's rare few exceptions here where I tell you not to buy the figure if you do want it. Most of these are fine if you're down for the colors. Some of them are very much not, but if you want the others, then I'd say go ahead. At worst, they're mostly side grades. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.